What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for being here today. Before we kick off today's show, just wanted to thank you for helping me hit 10,000 followers, which we hit yesterday. Really appreciate that. Means a ton. Just love doing this every day. Love talking Packers. Wouldn't want to be doing anything else in the world. And the fact that there are those of you out there who enjoy, me doing it and listen in, it just means the world. So thank you so incredibly much. On to 20,000, and we will continue from there. Also, before we jump in, I know this is a Packers podcast, but we had a major announcement from J.J. Watt. He is going to be retiring at the end of this season. One of the absolute all-time greats, first ballot Hall of Famer, in my opinion. Prime J.J. Watt was absolutely insane. I think Justice Mosqueda tweeted it out, and I totally agree. The two most dominant players that I've seen really defensively in my lifetime. I got to see a bit of Lawrence Taylor, but that was, I didn't know enough at that point. But J.J. Watt, Aaron Donald, those two just absolutely beyond incredible players in their prime. And the longevity of Watt, the stuff that he did, like the season where he has 3 touchdown catches on offense and looked like he probably could have played tight end if he really wanted to. Just like I said, a first ballot Hall of Famer. Has donated how much time, effort, energy, money to charitable causes, hurricane relief funds, etc. We never really know, who these people are, but Watt certainly seems like one of the good ones, and just what a amazing, incredible career. And it'll be sad to see him go. It's not going to be the same NFL without J.J. Watt. Wish he would have gotten a stint with the Packers. That would have been a lot of fun. Wasn't meant to be. It is what it is. He did get to do the dream drive, the bikes, when he was here as part of the Packers training camp festivities. When I think he was he a Texan at the time? So that was really cool that he got to do that. But man, what a career, and kudos to J.J. Watt on that phenomenal career. All right, on to Packers stuff, because that's what we're here for. The same day that J.J. Watt retires, Baby Watt, which was Dean Lowry's nickname at one point coming out of college, Dean Lowry ends up on IR. Disappointing, certainly, that Lowry's not going to be able to finish out the season. It's quite possible that this past week he played his last downs in green and gold. And listen, I get some of the frustrations with Dean Lowry. He had, I would say, prior to last year, so 2019, 2020, he had a stint that wasn't very good. He just had gotten that big contract, and I get it. I really, really do. I thought last year in 2021, he bounced back really nicely. I thought he had a nice season last year. This year's been a bit more up and down, but I still think he gets far too much, hate even this year than what's really warranted. He's not a playmaker, right? He's made a handful of big plays through the course of his career, but he's not a playmaker. He's just a, rotational defensive lineman that at times, due to no fault of his own, has been put in positions that haven't been super advantageous to him. When he has to be the number 2 guy to Kenny Clark, that's not putting Dean Lowry in an advantageous position. If he's your number 4 defensive lineman, you're in a really good spot. If he's your number 2, you're in a really bad spot. And just because he probably got paid more than he should have, and probably was in a spot as the number 2 defensive lineman that he probably should not have been in, that's not Dean Lowry's fault. That's front office fault, right? And I think had Lowry been like the number 4 defensive lineman, like that first guy off the bench playing 20, 25 snaps per game through the course of his career, I think we'd have a lot different, view, and it would paint a lot different picture of Dean Lowry. I think he would have been phenomenal in that role. We just didn't have the ability to see him in that, unfortunately. But this is a guy that was a late 4th round pick. And those are, anything after the top 100 is you're lucky to get anything out of it. The fact that they got, so many years and so much productivity out of Dean Lowry for a late 4th round pick, really solid Green Bay Packer, deserves a bit more love than unfortunately he gets. But it very well could have been his last down in Green Bay. He goes on IR. And then it'll be interesting to see what that means moving forward. Clearly, it's going to mean more Devontae Wyatt. I think I would expect about 99% of the snaps on the defensive line moving forward will go to Kenny Clark, Jarron Reed, Devontae Wyatt, and TJ Slayton in some capacity. But they do have Jonathan Ford still on the 53-man roster. They do have Chris Slayton, who was kind of a preseason darling on the practice squad as well. So It's likely that they will have 5 guys active on game day on the defensive line. Does that mean Jonathan Ford actually gets a look? Does he get a handful of snaps here and there? Or will they bring Chris Slayton up from the practice squad and make him the 5th guy, and likely deactivating Jonathan Ford in that scenario? That will be something that's interesting moving forward, probably just for me, because like I said, in the next 2 games, defensive linemen, if you told me that defensive linemen not named, Wyatt Clark, Reed, or TJ Slayton, if you told me they got more than 5 snaps, I would say there's probably been an injury, right? But even still, it'll be interesting to see how they parse that out, who's active, who's not, and if Jonathan Ford actually gets some snaps along the defensive line. I'm a little bit more of a believer in Jonathan Ford than I think almost anyone is. You look at his tape in college. His tape in college is not fun. It's not good. So much so that when he's like this mammoth 300 and I don't even know 330-ish pound defensive lineman, he was so inconsistent with everything that even in goal line situations in college, they would not put him in the game. Like the 330-pound Jonathan Ford, they didn't trust him in goal line situations in college. That's where he was at. He showed some legitimate flashes in training camp, though. Do I think he's going to be anything that amounts to much of anything? Probably not. But there were some really unique and interesting flashes. They're just not people that are his size that move the way he does. I'm intrigued, to say the least, and hopefully they can unlock something and unearth something in Jonathan Ford. Unlikely, but like I said, I'm probably the only one nerding out about maybe 5 snaps about Jonathan Ford, but that is what I am here for and I love doing, so you're just going to have to put up with it. All right, next up, Packers with a open roster spot because they put Dean Lowry on IR. They pick up a player that I actually mentioned that the Packers could pick up off of a practice squad when I said early in mid-November. This is absolutely a humble brag. I'm going to be insufferable today. But when I said they should have released Sammy Watkins in like mid-November, and I said, some players that they could have elevated from the practice squad, or I said, or just go get Beau Melton from the Seahawks practice squad. That stuff never comes to fruition. So the fact that they actually, a month plus later, end up releasing Sammy Watkins, and then a little bit after actually sign Beau Melton from the practice squad, you can only tell how happy that I was with that situation. Melton's a really interesting player. Didn't get a ton of usage at the University of Rutgers, and he's a athletic freak. When we always talk about RAS scores, Kent Lee Platty's RAS or RAS scores, Melton tested a 9.24 in overall RAS score, which means he's a 92.4% athlete at the wide receiver position, an absolute freak, 4.34 40. He tested through the roof in just about everything. Not a super tall guy. He's like 5'10", I think. He has some gadget ability, some return ability. He's played special teams in college, I should note. He's been on the Seahawks practice squad all season long, so he has not been a part of their active team. But some really, really fun intangibles. He could do some returning if Keyshawn Nixon couldn't do that this week. Wouldn't shock me if Nixon can't do it, if Melton's all of a sudden the one that's back there. But really, really interesting player. I think you could use him in the backfield a little bit. There was some buzz around the Senior Bowl that maybe he could be put more in like a backfield, running back slash sort of role. I think he's, like I said, a little bit of a gadget guy, a little bit of a special teams guy with athletic attributes through the roof. Very, very intrigued by this player. And just remember, December 4 years ago, 2018, December 18th, the Packers picked up another wide receiver off the practice squad, Allen Lazard from Jacksonville. They bring him in. He has, I think, 1 catch at the end of that season, and then the rest was history, and he's had a really nice career in Green Bay. Not saying, Bo Melton's the next Allen Lazard. They're 2 totally different players, 2 totally different sizes, shapes, speeds, everything. But Green Bay's had some success picking up players off of practice squads in the past, and hopefully Bo Melton is the latest example of that. One other transaction I'd mentioned a couple weeks ago, that when Tipa Nalii was not activated off of injured reserve, that his season was over. Not only is his season over, but they now released him off of injured reserve as well. He will become a free agent, and that in almost entire likelihood ends his tenure as a Green Bay Packer. I'd be surprised if that ever comes up again. We'll see if he catches on with another team's practice squad or active roster at some point. Disappointing a little bit because they did put some time, effort, and energy. He's made 53-man rosters. He's been on the field, but just, got banged up this year, had to go on IR, and then it just went downhill from there. So best of luck to Tipa moving forward, but Tipa will no longer be a part of the Packers. And then from Aaron Rodgers, David Bakhtiari and Keyshawn Nixon, he mentioned in his interview with Pat McAfee on Tuesday that both of those players have the possibility. He said, that he thinks Bakhtiari will practice this week, and that Nixon has a chance to play and wants to play, potentially play on Sunday. So seems to be some good news from Bakhtiari and Nixon. I remember yesterday Matt LaFleur mentioned that Nixon and Nyman and Watson are day-to-day. So hopefully Green Bay gets some good news on the injury front after, unfortunately, the bad news that Dean Lowry is going to go on IR. All right, that brings us to our offensive breakdown this week. I actually want to start in a very surprising place, and that is with Royce Newman. And this is going to be a very interesting conversation because I should point out that Newman actually ended up as my third lowest graded player on offense this week, which for many people will not be a surprise. However, I actually really liked how Royce Newman played in this game, which is going to seem completely against what I'm just saying. Newman had a holding penalty and a false start. Those two were his primary negative grades in this game. Without that, Newman actually would have graded in the positive. They didn't give him much help. They kept him on an island the majority of the game at right tackle. He comes in cold, hasn't played in weeks for Yosh Nijman, and they didn't have to change the offense at all. And outside of the holding penalty and the false start, he would have been in the positive in this game. So I actually really liked some of the progress that Royce Newman made, especially you'd expect him to probably go in at guard if he's going in anywhere. He ends up having to go in at right tackle, and he held his own. And I mentioned this with Aaron Nagler on She Said TV on Tuesday, but there are two players who got benched recently or in this season, Darnell Savage and Royce Newman, who had to make appearances in this game due to benching Rudy Ford and due to Yosh Nijman's injury. And some players will not respond well to being benched. I thought Royce Newman and Darnell Savage coming into this game after having been benched, having not played in a while, I thought both of these guys responded incredibly well, and I give a lot of credit to Royce Newman. So you can't totally erase the false start. You can't totally erase the holding penalty, but if you can put blinders on a little bit and say, you know what, all right, he had a couple hiccups in the penalty area. Outside of those two plays was a positive day for Royce Newman, and I was actually encouraged by the way that he played. And like I said, they didn't give him much help. The offense didn't have to change, and you didn't notice any real difference outside of those two plays from Yosh to from Nijman to Newman. I'll put it that way. So impressive from Royce. I don't think there was much expectation when you saw Royce come in. You're like, oh, it's going to probably be a long rest of the day. Instead, he held up well, gave Rodgers time. Wasn't great in the run game, but overall, I was impressed by the performance. Part of that's expectations, right? We expected probably nothing from Royce, and the fact that he held up mostly well outside of two penalties is a bonus, but still, give credit where credit's due. Next player I really wanted to discuss was Mercedes Lewis. When you hear, I don't know, even the word that I want to use, but when you hear a player that's dominant, right? Or when you think of elite, I'll use that word. When you hear of an elite player, Mercedes Lewis is not a player that comes to mind when you think of elite players in the NFL. And that's fair. But Mercedes Lewis is elite at being a blocking tight end. Not an overall tight end. If you're talking about the top tight ends in football, I'm not sure Mercedes Lewis cracks the top 25, 30 overall. But if you just water it down or narrow it down into blocking tight ends, Mercedes Lewis is one. And I don't think anyone has a real argument. I've talked about it in the past. There are times where he looks legitimately like an offensive tackle out there. And this was one of those games where not only does he have some epic blocks in the run game and in pass protection and just doing offensive tackle work along the line, which is just crazy for being a tight end. But then to have the touchdown, to have the huge play down the field, which I know is a little bit, maybe it hit the ground, maybe it could have been called back. In the record books, that has gone down as a catch. I just thought Mercedes Lewis was fantastic in this game, and we don't talk about him enough. He doesn't get credit enough. He's a leader on this team. The entire team absolutely loves him. He's a threat in the red zone with just his overall size. He's catching wheel routes all of a sudden. And, man, just what he does as a blocker. I talk to you guys from time to time about just different players that I love the artistry of their game. David Bakhtiari at left tackle, Jair Alexander in coverage, what Devontae Adams did on a weekly basis, with his artistry of his route running and everything like that. Mercedes Lewis as a blocking tight end is elite, and he doesn't get enough credit. Go and watch the tape. Just spend some time watching Mercedes Lewis. It's not always fun just watching a guy in the line blocking edge rushers or whoever he has to block. Mercedes Lewis is worth watching. It's really, really fun, and I'm so glad I get to do it every week. And then before I get to my top three and bottom three, I've mentioned this before, and I'm going to say it again this week. John Runyon Jr. and Josh Myers are going to drive me insane. These two players can be Pro Bowl players in this league. They have every athletic trait. They have every size trait. They have everything that they need. And for about 50% of the game, like I said before, you can cut every game up and I can show you and be like, watch these two. These are two Pro Bowl caliber interior offensive linemen. But my goodness, I don't know if it's they get bored. I don't know if it's just they lose track of what they're doing. I don't know if they wear out as the course of the game goes along. I don't know if they just kind of go on autopilot. I have no idea what it is, but the variance in their play down to down is mind-numbing. And just about every game, there will be times where I'm going along and it's just like, all right, positive Runyon, positive Runyon, positive Runyon, positive Runyon, positive Myers, positive Myers, positive Myers. Like, man, these guys are playing great. And then there's a stretch of games where you're just like, negative Myers, negative Myers, negative Myers, negative Runyon, negative Runyon. And it's just so frustrating because they both have the ability to not be good offensive linemen, not be solid offensive linemen, to be Pro Bowl caliber offensive linemen. They show it. They go up against some of the best players and they win. And then it's just like they lose focus. I don't know what it is. It is crazy, but I just want them to find their consistency because if they do, we are talking about a really good interior offensive line with Elton and Myers and Runyon, and just set it and forget it. Those guys are going to dominate on the interior for the next 3 or 4 years, and it's going to be so fun. But right now, Myers and Runyon, you just don't know what you're going to get on a down-by-down basis. You might get a Pro Bowl level domination of a top defensive lineman. You might get bull rushed 10 yards in the backfield by a nobody, practice squad call-up. No idea on any given play. And it is so frustrating. I just hope they find their consistency because they're so talented. And I just really want to see them get there because I really like both players, especially Runyon. I think Runyon can be even better, but they just have to find a way to be consistent on a down-by-down basis. And if they do, look the heck out because both of them have really good potential. And I just want to see them reach it because they're both really, really fun players, especially when they're playing well. All right, top 3 players this week. Number 3, Christian Watson, even in limited playing time, he's changing the Packers offense. In a nutshell, he is changing the Packers offense on the fly. What he can do after the catch, what he can do down the field, what he can do holding on a tough contested catch on 4th down. Imagine what we're saying right now if Rodgers hits Watson in stride on the 4th down touchdown. Like this could have been another epic week from Christian Watson. Yes, he goes down with the injury. Yes, there's been a few injuries now this season. You'd love to see that hopefully not be an issue moving forward. Doesn't sound like it's anything serious, but my goodness, he continues to impress. Number 2 is Mercedes Lewis, who we just talked about. Number 1, my top graded Packer this week, which I'm so excited about, Zach Tom. I'm telling you guys, he's a starting tackle. He's a starting left tackle. And I agree with Mike Wall. The difference between Zach Tom and David Bakhtiari, there's still a gap there. But Zach Tom is a starting tackle and a starting left tackle. And he's good. I'm so excited about it. And I don't know. I mentioned this on Twitter. He's one of their best 5 offensive linemen. There's no question about it. I have 2 offensive linemen for the Packers graded in the positive this season. David Bakhtiari and Zach Tom. And Elton Jenkins, since moving to left guard, well in the positive as well. But Runyon's a negative. Nyman's a negative. Myers is a big negative. Nobody else has come close to what Bakhtiari and Tom and Elton, since he's moved to left guard, have been. I don't think with Bakhtiari potentially coming back this week, it's clearly Bakhtiari's job at left tackle. We're not even going there. It is 1,000,000% Bakhtiari's job. So that's not in question. But it's really tough because to me, he's clearly one of the best 5. But I don't know that I'd mess with anything else. Is he a better right tackle than Yosh Nijman? I don't know. Now, if Yosh is out, you probably just move Zach Tom to right tackle and you see what he can do over there. I think that goes without saying, but that'll be interesting especially the way Royce played this past week. I think that's Zach Tom, but I don't think that they would. They're clearly not going to put him in for Elton Jenkins. That goes without saying. I don't think that they would put him at center over Myers. I don't think they put him in at right guard over John Runyon Jr., and he struggles more on the interior. So it's one of those things where he's best at left tackle. That's his spot, and David Bakhtiari just happens to be there. I know Green Bay's really keen on top 5 guys. We want our top 5 guys out there. I think it's really tough for Zach Tom because I think he's a tackle. I think he's a left tackle, and that spot is just spoken for. You're not moving Bakhtiari, and it just might mean that Tom has to be on the bench for the remainder of this season, but he has a bright future. I'm really, really excited about him. He'll get overpowered from time to time, but the technique is good. The footwork is good. The athleticism is good. He's extremely agile. He's not going to move anyone in the run game as a maul or anything like that, but really fun player. Top graded offensive player for me this week. So Tom was 1, Lewis was 2, Watson is 3. My bottom 3, unfortunately, again, Robert Tonyan. Let me say this about Tonyan. This offense is really crappy for tight ends. It just is. He'll get a seam route or something that he can kind of do every once in a great while, but I can't tell you how many times it's Tonyan is chipping and then he goes down the field and just turns around and the linebacker's right on him. I don't care if you are George Kittle, Kyle Pitts, Travis Kelce. If you're just asked to chip, go 3 yards and turn around while a linebacker's sitting right in that zone, there's only so much that you can do. He'll run in the flat. Again, there's only so much that you can do. I think this offense isn't doing any favors to Tonyan, but I think a large part of the reason that the offense is doing that is because they know Tonyan just can't separate right now. I hope he gets his legs back. I hope this is just a recovering from a torn ACL thing, and next year his legs are under him a little bit more, but he can't separate. He can't get anything after the catch. There's just nothing there, and you'll see him catch a pass every now and again. He'll get up the seam, and Rodgers will throw him open every now and again, but this team needs a major influx of talent at the tight end position outside of their incredible blocking tight end in Mercedes Lewis. Romeo Doubs was my second lowest graded wide receiver. Love some of the stuff from Romeo. And if you just put on the highlight stuff and just see the plays where he's targeted, you really, really like it, right? But he did have the drop on the opening drive. It was a 3rd down. It didn't really matter. They would have had to kick the field goal anyway. Actually, I will say this. There was a angle where if he catches that, and I'll also say this, I'm going all around here, but there's a chance the defensive lineman tipped the ball. On the first angle, it's really tough to tell. On the TV angle, it's tough to tell. And then they show the all-22, and right where the defensive lineman puts his hand up, and the ball's coming this way, there's a camera literally right in the way, like one of the sky cameras, and you can't see if the ball was tipped or not. I'm watching the referees to see if they do this, and none of them do. I do think there's a chance the ball was slightly tipped at the line of scrimmage, but still a ball that Doubs should have came down with. But more importantly, there's a lot of plays that you don't see that if you watch the all-22, you would or could, where he's just not getting off of coverage. And that's going to come with time. I like his route running. He just needs to get a little bit more physical, which we saw on the one play. One of my favorite plays in this game was Doubs basically saying, get the F off me to the corner, and then separating and going up and getting the catch. Really, really love that play. One of my favorite plays in this game. He just needs to get a bit more physical, and he just needs to be, just learn how to get a little bit more separation in the league. It'll get there. Love Romeo Doubs, but there's just a little bit too much of him being covered in this game, unfortunately. And then, as mentioned earlier, Royce Newman was my 3rd lowest graded player, mostly because of the holding and the offsides. Had it not been for that, he would not have been on that list. So, top 3, Zach Tom, Mercedes Lewis, Christian Watson. Bottom 3, Tonyan, Doubs, and Newman. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be right back here tomorrow. So make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, make sure to comment. Appreciate you guys so incredibly much. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.